In a detailed analysis published in the Jerusalem Strategic Tribune, Iranian-French author and filmmaker Raghu Kondori, president of the Shavand think tank and author of Iran's Ethical Renaissance and Insights into Political Intelligence, argues that the Islamic Republic has been fundamentally misunderstood for decades. The mistake, he says, is structural. Most observers still analyze Iran as a conventional state, either a centralized dictatorship or a system destined to eventually crack under sanctions, protests, or military confrontation. But Iran doesn't operate like that. It operates like something else entirely. An onion, a layered architecture of power that Raghu Kondori peels back as follows. At the surface, visible institutions, elected bodies, formal ministries. Deeper down, ideological structures, clerical authority, security networks. Deeper still, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, economic systems shaped by sanctions, and regional networks extending across multiple theaters of influence. Each layer is distinct, but none of them is independent, and none of them is sufficient on its own to break the system. This is the key insight of Kondori's analysis. Every crisis removes one layer, but another layer activates beneath it. Sanctions do not simply weaken the system, they redirect power into shadow financial networks. Military pressure does not just degrade capabilities, it reinforces internal cohesion. Political unrest does not necessarily destabilize the center. It often strengthens the security architecture around it. The system absorbs shocks unevenly, but it absorbs them, and that is the point. Over 4 decades, war, isolation, assassinations, and internal unrest, the Islamic Republic did not become more centralized. It became more distributed, not as reform, but as survival. Authority now exists in parallel forms: official institutions alongside ideological command structures, state diplomacy alongside regional military ecosystems, and formal economics alongside sanctions-driven shadow systems. At the center of this architecture sits the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, not just a military force, but a political actor, an economic network, an ideological institution, and a regional power structure embedded across the system itself. In Kondori's framework, the IRGC is not inside the state. It is part of the state's structural DNA. This is why conventional pressure often fails to produce expected outcomes. Because decision-making in Iran is not purely vertical, it is distributed. Even local actors, governors, security commanders, economic networks, often operate with significant autonomy under a shared principle: preserving the system. As Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian once remarked, every governor is a president. In most states, this would suggest administrative decentralization. In Iran, it reveals something deeper, a form of operational decentralization built for continuity under crisis. What emerges is a system where control is not simply exercised from the top down, but replicated across multiple overlapping centers of authority. Fire-at-will logic of survival. This is what makes Iran so difficult to read, and even harder to reshape. Because even when the center signals restraint, peripheral structures may resist, delay, or escalate. Not out of defiance, but out of interpretation, what it means to protect the system. This logic extends beyond Iran's borders. Networks often described as proxies in Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and elsewhere increasingly function as extended components of the same architecture, not fully independent actors, not fully state-controlled instruments, but hybrid structures operating within the broader ecosystem of Iranian strategic depth. This ambiguity is not accidental, it is structural, and it reinforces the same principle: layered survival. The consequence is paradoxical. The same architecture that protects Iran from collapse also limits its flexibility. A system designed for endurance becomes a system resistant to change. Reform becomes difficult not because power is too concentrated, but because it is too dispersed. Succession, particularly in a post-Khamenei scenario, therefore becomes structurally complex. Each layer, security, clerical, economic, regional, will seek to preserve its influence within the next configuration of power, and in doing so, each may constrain the system's ability to move in a unified direction. This is the final paradox of the onion state. It survives everything, but it changes only slowly and unevenly. Kondori's conclusion is stark. Iran is neither a collapsing regime nor a conventional authoritarian state awaiting transition. It is a distributed ideological security architecture built for permanence under pressure. And misunderstanding that architecture leads to repeated analytical failure. Because before strategy comes structure, and before solutions come understanding. This is JST World Watch, and this is the system the world still struggles to decode.